Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and rapidly evolving frontiers, brain-computer interfaces, or also known as BCI, but from a European perspective. Joining us is Dr. Martin Schüttler, co-founder and chief technology officer at CorTec, the first German company at the forefront of neuroface innovation. From restoring lost function into potentially redefining in how we interact with machines, and even our own biology, BCIs are no longer science fiction. In this conversation, we'll explore Martin's journey into the BCI community, what sets Germany's approach apart on the global stage, and how neurotechnology can intersect with the complex human nervous system. We'll also tackle big questions around privacy, policy, and power. Who owns the brain data? Can global standards keep up with innovation? And what happens when this technology moves beyond the lab and into everyday life? Join us as we get rebelliously curious. Martin, thank you so much for joining me on Rebelliously Curious. Last summer, I was in New York City at the BCI Symposium and just right outside of Central Park. And I ended up meeting you. Funny enough, I actually saw, I believe, you and one of your coworkers before we both walked into the building. I do remember that. So I actually remember seeing you before I even actually spoke to you. Funny enough how the world works. And we end up finding ourselves in the cocktail reception speaking to each other and finding out that you are a German-based, you do multiple different things, but when we're looking at BCI, you're a German-based BCI company, and you're the first German BCI company. So before we get into brain-computer interfaces and what's actually happening in the European space, I'd like to say thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about how you found yourself in brain-computer interface technology. I always find it so fascinating because it's not one of the easiest topics. I think it's more easier to report on than it would be to work on the inside.
Yes. So I was drawn into the field of neurotechnology more than 30 years ago by an article in a newspaper on, making blind people see again at the lane walk, introducing the naive audience to neurotechnology. I found that so fascinating that I started working in this area as an intern, as a master's student, as a PhD student, and so on. And at one point in time, I was working at the University of Freiburg in southwestern Germany, and bumped into someone who came from neurobiology, and that was Jörn Rickert. And he had the drive and the initiative to actually start a company, because we both knew it's very hard as an academic to take neurotechnology actually into patients. And at this time, that was in the 2000s, 2005 to 2006. We had in Freiburg a brain-computer interface initiative, which was purely academic, but we had access to epilepsy patients, as I guess that's how many of those stories started. So the epilepsy patients were implanted in the epilepsy monitoring unit with cortical grid electrodes in their head for localizing the epileptic tissue. And they were monitored over days, which is boring. And then they let researchers play around with their brain signals. So we recorded brain signals while they were doing tasks, and we figured out it's actually not too difficult to predict what they want to do by just looking at the brain signal. And we thought, wow, that's fascinating. I mean, these are electrodes that sit in the head, but with wires coming out. And our idea was when there's severely impaired people, and we had an implant for them that could send these data wireless through the skin, they basically could participate in the society again. using that interface for communication or control of a wheelchair and so on. And that wasn't the idea really behind starting CorTec as a company. And then it took years and years and years and money and money and money of developing this technology that eventually was first time implanted mid of last year in a patient in Seattle.
Wow, congratulations too. It's such a huge hurdle. When you're working, yeah, it is. It really is. And it always fascinates me when I hear these types of advancements that are happening and happening all over the world, not just within the United States or in Canada.
Yeah.
We're seeing this in multiple different countries now. Compared to other BCI companies in North America or even just around the world, how are you different than, and what's your main focus compared to other ones, or maybe even similar companies? But you do have one core focus, I believe, that you have.
Yeah, so we really started to help people with severe disability, and that could be ALS or spinal cord injury or other indications that lead to severe paralysis or impairment. And for example, when you talk about spinal cord injury, these are often young men because they are in the phase of their life in which they take risks, and sometimes this goes wrong. So that means when you have those as patients, they can have another 60 years or something in front of them, which means the technology that you're developing must be super robust and long lasting. So our concept was helping those with the technology that's very robust. And robust, I mean, with not only that, the technology is not supposed to dissolve or break or something. You also take a decision what kind of neural signal we're trying to pick from the brain. And different to other companies that try to get in contact with individual nerve cells, we decided we go for a signal that is very robust over years, and that's the electrocardiography. Probably that pronunciation, but that's basically electrical contacts on the brain that sends the electrical signals of hundreds of thousands or millions of nerve cells at the same time. So you're not super specific, but you're very robust over time. So the signal that you're picking, that's going to be the signal that you pick a year later and many years later. So that's a robustness that was very important for us when we decided what kind of technology we want to develop to help those people. And very often, as I mentioned, you can get Neuralink or Quadromics, they're emphasis more on very high resolution individual nerve cell communication. And that wasn't really the focus of the trial.
So what's the advantage then of focusing on the nerve cells then, outside of maybe the other type of tactics that people are using in different companies? Like what is the difference? And is there a long-term effect or a positive maybe long-term effect by just focusing on those specific nerve cells and more of them?
Yeah, well, if you're getting in contact with hundreds of thousands of individual nerve cells, you can harvest more detailed information from the brain.
Makes sense. Yeah.
In the past, we've seen the technology that was around in the last 20 years, predominantly provided by BlackRock in the United States. We saw that there was a decline in signal quality over the years, which had many influences that led to it. There were technology challenges, many of them were actually tackled, but there's also a fundamental problem with the biology doesn't want to have this foreign body very close to the nerve cells. So we saw that these electrical interfaces that consist of tiny little spikes being pushed next to the nerve cells has some challenges with very long-term consistency. But there have been others that changed a little bit the concept. Still want to get into individual nerve cycles, like change, for example, the materials all the methods, how that is injected into the brain tissue. But up to today, we don't know very well how long that is lasting. And perhaps problems have been solved. I don't know. I very much hope so, but maybe not. When we started, there was basically no indication that this will last for a very, very long time. So we have to pick something else, which is good enough for what we are trying to. And so the device that we built are not only used for sensing brain activity to get the patient back into control by controlling digital technology, but it's also gives the opportunity or the option to send information back to the brain by sending electrical pulses. And that is something that allows us to use our technology not only in the classical BCI space, but also in the therapy space. And that's also what we're currently doing. So we're using our device at our first patient as a therapeutic device, stimulating the brain while we are reading from them in order to improve outcome of stroke reading.
Yeah, I think the key word you said there is therapeutic. I think the one thing I love about Germany is you lead with therapeutics. That's something that is not really done in North America or not done well, I would say. Can you break down then how you define therapeutic then in BCI? Because most people wouldn't think there would be something therapeutic, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. But I guess there's many, many definitions of it. So often you see that people divide brain-computer interface technology into two areas. One is therapeutic or curing, and the other one is enabling or communication. So in the second, you take the brain signal and try to restore some functionality outside the body, while the first one is really trying to get the body back on track. And that's pretty much my definition of it, and I'm sure there are others. But when you're talking about brain implant for therapy, most of them use electrical currents to stimulate the brain to achieve some sort of therapeutic effect. Like we know that already since over 30 years from deep brain stimulation, that is, as you know, often used to control symptoms like Parkinson's disease, like severe tremor or seizure. There's other therapeutic brain stimulation approaches like treatment of depression or obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders, and all sorts of things can be tried to be treated by electrical brain stimulation. And traditionally, this has been done very successfully, with just stimulating the brain. But in most of the cases, at least up till pretty much today, the recent years, this has been done without taking the actual state of the brain very much into account. So the deep brain stimulator to treat Parkinson's was programmed by the clinician, switched on, and that was it. And then the patient goes home, and after a couple of weeks or a month, comes back to the clinician, and they check if the parameters are still good. So the device cannot sense if the brain actually needs a treatment or requires adaptation. So I like to compare that with cardiac pacing. Like in the 1950s, in the late 1950s, we got the first implanted cardiac pacemakers. And those were set to 90 beats per minute, no matter if you want to sleep or climb stairs. It saved lives, but it wasn't a very good treatment. And brain stimulation or brain implant therapy is still a bit like that. So, and we have to change it. No, brain obviously is a very complex organ. We want to treat it with very simple methods. But at least we need to know the condition the brain is in. Do we actually need stimulation right now or not? And was the last stimulation that we applied Uh, did that lead to the right condition of the brain? Did it actually treat the brain, or do we need to increase the amplitude a little bit or jump to another contact? Like so that is currently developing, but it was still rather new in brain therapy. That is still developing.
So interesting. Because when I think about this, I always think of the past scientific experiments that were done with the bull. I believe those were in the 1960s. And they had an implant where they stimulated the bull's mind and was able to stop their mood and what they and if he was going to charge
Yeah.
at somebody or not, right? And when we see that, it's very similar to that when we're looking at therapeutics when it comes even into mental health. And we're looking at someone when they have depression. Maybe we're using a BCI to stimulate that so that we can, prevent them from having, depression or maybe different forms of anxiety or schizophrenia if it's mental health or mental health disorders. Right. It can help in many different ways, but it also can be a slippery slope of, are we supposed to experience these things? And this is what we're supposed to be doing as being human and be able to overcome those challenges that we're given in life? Or do we opt for medical procedures that could either be ethical or not, depending? And I would be curious to see your perspective on that because it's not BCI is such a wonderful space and it's helping so many people. But then there's also this really dark side that potentially BCI could go to. Uh, and I'm curious to see where you feel we might be headed and what you think of the therapeutics when it comes to dealing with things like schizophrenia or bipolar or all different types of mental health disorders.
Yeah, I think we have a very, very powerful tool, especially for novel ideas of treating mental health disorders. And so I'm electrical engineer, so I'm on thin ice here. But um, so I was told. So we have in our community stereotactic surgeon who also does the brain stimulation for depression. And he says it's possible to control the mood of the patients with depression. Um, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to fix this mood of every patient to be some sort of a nutrient. So they want to experience mood changes, and they also sometimes want to experience latent changes, but they don't want to get into manic or depressive state. This is something that can be detected with brain computer. So that only when it becomes too extreme that there's a treatment. But you don't want to treat them all the time. You want to allow them to live their normal life and being disappointed and being excited and so. And only when it becomes pathological, you want to treat. And I think that is the big promise of those devices that read the brain for a better treatment. So I think that's a good part. And I guess there are many, many other examples that we can talk about where this really makes a big sense to the patient. And so the dark side of it, I guess the dark side is probably everybody sees other dangers in this technology. So the fundamental danger is that we are looking into someone's head and we are always collecting data. And these data are very rich. And the information that we harvest today, um, we can, to a certain degree, decipher, but with a growing knowledge of how to decode brain activity, we know more and more and more about what's actually happening in the brain. So the data that I record today, I might be able to understand that this means, a patient is excited or is sliding towards depression. But maybe tomorrow we have other algorithms and looking at the same data and there's other information decoded from that. And that might be information that goes into where privacy suddenly is under threat.
Exactly what I was thinking. Privacy is under threat. There are laws that are happening now or being put in front of Congress. Chuck Schumer has put Mind Act on September 28th in front of Congress to look at about privacy when it comes to BCI and Mind data. How is Europe or even just Germany looking at privacy? And is privacy something that is owned to the individual potentially, let's say in the future with BCI within Germany or within Europe? Does the person own their data, or is this something that the state or the government would still collect, or just the private company, or both?
Yes. I'm not entirely sure where we're today and where we're going to be tomorrow. So currently by far the most BCI studies are within research consortium. But I guess they have a very different take on plain data means and what it could be used for. And I think being a little bit more open there, share data, and let the researchers analyze whatever they can, as long as the patient is well educated about that. Probably all right. I think it's getting a little bit more scrutiny when the devices are out there in large numbers. And so there's not a very, very close relationship between the researchers and the patients. It's just, it's streamed to some database, and we, of course, have to be very careful who's actually accessing those databases. Is like just the clinician, and maybe the patient wants to see, oh, I'm making some progress in this particular way, a technical disease. Is that something that someone could actually support an implant by asking for access to the brain data? One obvious stakeholder would be a health insurance company, knowing a little bit better what you're doing the entire day to see what is a good contract for having your health insurance. And if these data are out and we know what the data says tomorrow, we still don't know, as I mentioned just a minute ago, we still don't know what people can contact from that tomorrow, or what people can actually understand when there's a load of these data pooling. So then maybe people understand a little bit better. This is this kind of development of brain activity. We know where that leads to, and can they basically prejudge you in whatever you want to do, or how you want to behave, or what your mindset is, and so on. That becomes really critical.
Oh, yeah. Health insurance, for sure. It's so scary because they can already kind of predict if you have something, right? If you and your family, you have Alzheimer's or dementia, right? Or Parkinson's or a neurological disease potentially, they could say, well, if you have the biomarkers for this, BCI might be possible to have at some point in time in history. And so you'll have that, but you'll still be, you'd still need insurance.
Yes.
And you're right. And if they would even insure you based on that or not, that's very, very scary. And how do you even insure a BCI?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. But Chrissy, we have been there with all sorts of data already. So the brain data, I guess it has a special quality over other data that we have collected from basically from us all by just looking at our user profiles when we are going shopping on Amazon. So, but also when we have large database where our, for example, medical images are, and so I guess that we look at a history of collecting very private insights into our bodies and minds. And BCI and brain data just adds up on them. And maybe there's a little bit of an extra level because, well, we all believe our central nervous system, our brain, is basically more or less us ourselves. Right? It defines how we act, how we feel, and so. And we have access to data that is generated by this organ, and that is unfiltered data. So different to when you're using a computer and Google is watching you or Amazon or whatever, you know that, and you can still control what you want to type into your keyboard or not. But the things that go on in your head, so there's of course the economic, but actually, someone could watch you all the time while thinking about all sorts of bad things that you eventually decided we don't want to do. But the information is already there.
Yeah, yes, yeah, it's scary. We choose to log on to Google, we choose to log on to Amazon or watch Netflix, right? It's not 24/7 for a lot of us, right? Our cell phones, if anything, are connection devices that we have everywhere. We're at a restaurant, we put it in front of us, and we know that the CIA and multiple governments are listening into our phone calls and our conversations, even when we're at dinner. Even when the phone is off, they're still able to. So we know that, and a lot of us know that, and we still opt in to have our phone, but it's so different when you have it in your brain and it's 24/7 and you forget and you don't even realize that it's there. And then I would imagine I know I would get worried if the decisions that I'm making are mine. And people are saying, well, that's not possible yet. And I understand that, but it might not be the fact that it's implanting an idea in me, but there are things like mind control and there are things like programs that have happened in the past in the American government that have really tapped into that concept of being to stimulate or not give an idea, but an emotion to not to a BCI, let's say potentially, but to some form of torture treatment from MK Ultra, let's say. But there are reasons to be able to stimulate someone's emotions to make them do something, right? And that's really scary. And if you have that in your mind and it's not telling you what to think, but it's stimulating the emotion of how to feel, I get really worried about that. And then I also look at the other side where I'm like, gosh, I don't suffer from depression, thankfully, but if I did, I would really want something like a BCI to help me because it would relieve that pain because mental pain is very equivalent and I think sometimes worse than physical pain. They're both horrible, but mental pain is something that people anguish their entire life and they never get any relief whatsoever. So this would help them. But I think do we trust in ourselves and in our government that we will go down the right direction along with consumer brands?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is actually the key question. I think, I've often heard that, for example, in depression or compulsive disorders, um, people say, well, when you've got a brain implant that stimulates your brain, it changes basically your personality. So you're not a depressed person anymore. I guess changing the personality to a degree is the therapy. And that's exactly what we do with pharmaceutical agents too. That's actually, if that happens, it's actually a success. So I'm not too worried about that bit. But I think what happens because when we have to play in cloud, so much depends on how sure we are that the data are somewhat in one aspect. So you don't even need with your device to stimulate your brain and change something in the way you're thinking. It could be subtle, like some sort of biasing or so. But already when you know that, I call it, it's too blunt. So we are not so super good at this yet. But when you know someone is listening, you control yourself in not thinking too much in direction where you believe someone really shouldn't listen to them. So which means the knowledge that someone might tap into your brain changes already the way you are thinking. So of course only when you're not entirely sure that this data is safe and nobody can look at it or can look at it and correlate whatever they see to you. And that's why I believe everything about this data security stuff and safety stuff is absolutely paramount in this system.
when I look at laws and regulations, and I've thought about this, what kind of laws and regulations would want in parameters? I think we have to have BCI data. Right now, it's really small kind of neuro data. It's nothing super important, right? We have more data watching Netflix and what we're watching in our social patterns there than we do in a BCI data right now. But that will change. And I think for me, especially on the emotional perspective, I wouldn't want somebody to know when I'm happy, when I'm not, when I'm sad, and what those patterns consistently look like over a course of years and how to adjust those moods. If I needed it, obviously, yes. But if I didn't, I wouldn't want someone to have that power over me because that's my emotions. And it very much attaches to my health as well and my well-being and being a human. So I think that some of these laws and regulations that should be put forward is that you're not allowed to sell data to lobbyists. You're not allowed to sell data to government institutions or politicians or any of that, because that data and our emotional data can be used against us in advertising and in marketing and public relations. So I think that those are the parameters that we choose to play by. Or the other option is we own our data 100%. And then we get to choose what we sell. I think that's fair. Some people would sell everything. They'll sell their soul along with it as well. And some people won't. So you either give it power back to the people so that they can choose what they want to do with their data, or you create, government regulations that protects people. And right now that none of that's in place right now. Mind you, the data again is very, very tiny, but it's going to grow very, very, very fast.
Yeah, I agree. There's a concept to have this privacy, or we can even take it one step further, say human rights built in. Yeah, so we can build devices that do not harvest all the brain data. They do their decision. They do some sort of data crunching, basically, let's say, in the implant. And the result of that is sent to a computer, but not the raw brain data. So these are concepts that can help. But at the same time, it limits you with the option that you're having once you got a technology like that in front of your head. It's super interesting, and yeah, I have the same take that you. It's at the same time it's boring, and we need strong regulations. At the same time, strongly regulation is something that usually keeps people from actually building those devices because it is in our company, it's our 15th year in which we implanted our first case. And in 2025, we implanted our first patient. And that's not because we are a group of engineers that work 24/7 on improving the technology. We had a long times in which we showed that we are compliant with the regulation. You can probably up the regulation with it. And what we just saw in China, we got in China this new device with BCI, I believe, was implanted 1.5 years ago for the very first time. And just recently, and a couple of days ago, they got medical device approval. So there's the regulatory pathway must be very different. So that's unthinkable.
It's wild how fast China's moving with BCI.
Yeah.
They are, if people want to say it or not, they're ahead of the game. And it's how do we, I think you just have to go to China to see how much advanced they are from a tech perspective and how they're embedding a lot of BCI within their government and within, spending money in healthcare to be able to do this research. I have heard when I was at the symposium, actually, I was speaking to someone, another VP of a company, and I unfortunately can't say who, but he was saying to me, when he was in China, they were already having brain-computer interface rooms. like Minority Report, like those things were already happening. So, and that was used with the use of not BCI, not just with, virtual reality, with a BCI in the mind. So there's a lot more going on than I think has generally been reported that we've seen from China. And I really want to see it. Don't, I'm so curious to send myself over to China to find some way to see it. But it also scary because we do have something that we have to think about is BCI tourism. Like that's a real thing that's going to happen. If we have laws and regulations that are saying, well, you can't have a BCI, you can in some states, you can in some countries, you can in others, what stops somebody from going to China or any other country or a foreign adversary and getting that tech in their body now and then going back and forth and upgrading when they need it, but being able to use that tech within their own country to their advantage?
Yes, no. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And in fact, the Chinese government or some institution below it issued ethical guidelines on BCI. And that's, I don't know when it was, 1 year ago, 2 years ago or so. And I read through them. And so the ethical guidelines had a strong focus on enhancement. And in a way that their biggest concern was that the right use of BCI can generate a split in the society between those who have a BCI and can use it, for example, for more effective learning or some other enhancement stuff, while the others don't have, and maybe not be able to afford one. Now that is a danger to the Chinese government. So they have to make sure that their billion uh, population is doing fine, and they don't want to have that split in two between the upgraders and the and that seems for that to be a real threat.
The neuro elite is a real threat. It's true. Like people are like, "Oh, that would be a conspiracy theory." I'm like, "No, that's where we're leading to if we don't, have a understand how BCI will be implemented into society, even from a global perspective." We already now, people living in, developing nations, have access to internet and cell phones now, majority of it. And, they're still really just getting online now, right? There's a lot of remote places that don't, but there's more and more, developing nations that are jumping online and be able to contribute, and we're able to see their worlds and they're able to see ours. But that's going to be obsolete once BCI comes in because you're talking about the next level of evolution, of not human evolution physically, but mechanical evolution. Uh, that it will be the next level. And all those other people in developing nations and everywhere else, even people in Canada that can't afford it to have a BCI, they're already stuck. Even now, along with AI, like if you're not learning AI and then potentially think about getting a BCI in the future, you should just retire now.
Yeah. Well, we all don't know how that's going to start out. But so at this point in time, we got early companies that have their first handful of BCIs patient, and some of them have ideas about what is going to be the price for it, and so price that someone has to pay to get a BCI. I guess there's a lot of development ahead of us, and we can't possibly say which direction that goes. And there might be hyper-performant BCI that are restricted to a very small minority of people who's super wealthy. And then there might be BCI that is basically for every elementary school kid, so they can actually learn quick. And there's going to be performance difference. There's going to be price differences. For one, I might need a surgical robot, and the other one I get in a piercing studio also, tattoo studio. I guess the BCI will come in all different shapes and sizes, and but I strongly believe there will be around many of them, and many of the things that come with it are fantastic, and some of them are very scary for us today. And we touch a little bit on data as well. Some information that could be actually traced back to you as the brain that's generating this information. So my take on that one, when I got the first time I believe I understood, oh, that's where this goes, and that's what we're going to learn about someone who's having an implanted BCI, or maybe even a proper part. Do I want to contribute to this technology, basically putting a smartphone in someone's hand? I have little kids. I don't like when they're on their smartphone. So I want them to have a smartphone there. Clearly not. And I guess everybody agrees. Maybe most people do. But at the same time, as an engineer, being in the field now for 30 years and seeing where this might lead to, I've seen now it is exactly the responsibility of these people like me trying to push that in the right direction. So when we understand that data security is a major issue or longevity of devices, we must actually talk about that, try to contribute to international standards. So this can be something that the company could actually put on their product as a stamp compliant to A, B, and C. So your health insurance or your government or whatever authorities cannot access your data, something like that in this direction. Because we are in an early stage, we still can't shape a lot of this student.
No, not yet, but I think you're right when it comes to being able to advocate, and hopefully companies that are building and growing choose to do the ethical thing or the right thing for the average person. As I always say, Sally down the street, thinking about her and her best life that she possibly could have, having a BCI or not. One of my last questions to you is, how far do you think we are away from this being a consumer product that we can buy? We know that Apple and Microsoft has worked with InBrain and Synchron in the healthcare space when it comes to using consumer-based products with BCI. But when do you think this will be something that will be on the market that we could buy, the first iPhone version, number one, of a BCI?
Well, there's this entire field of consumer neurotech.
Outside of just the headsets, outside of, the headsets you can buy now, outside of that, yeah, more invasive. You can buy an invasive BCI.
Yeah, well, I guess that's important because this consumer neurotech, that is rocketing already. Like it is a growth rate worldwide by 25% annually. So, implants, I think that's a very good question. So I tried to find implants that have actually zero medical need to be implanted. Well, besides obvious like PSAs or something like breast augmentation, but electronic implant, they actually found only one today, and that is wireless transponders that people implant to, open the door. There was once in Spain, in Barcelona, at a bar, which you could only pay with an implanted transponder. That bar didn't last very long, but you can imagine. You didn't want to have something implanted just to get a beer. But it was in the media for a while. That was something a couple of years ago, I guess. But having something implanted for fun is something where something like that interacts with your nervous system is something that is not really foreseen by our legislation. So you're not a patient, right? Because you're not suffering. So the typical regulations that are made to protect patients and make sure that the risk benefit is clearly on the side of the benefit. That doesn't really apply anymore. So I don't know on what we're doing there. But I guess it's a field that we have to tackle because that's going to come. If I have a little implant that I can activate and be more focused or have more less problem with short memory loss, I think there's all sorts of little things that really can make a difference. People they're gonna want from them. That's super sure. And maybe they are not going back to the example of schools. Maybe they don't want it because they try to super to help them. Maybe they want to keep up with the ethics. So if everybody is reading a book in twice and half the time, you take a week, and instead of going out for soccer, you're still reading because you don't have an income. You will put on some pressure on your parents to get to an income and actually keep up with the other things. I guess it's going to be development that we have to sort of anticipate, also come up with an appropriate regulations for them.
Yeah. And just even having a little bit more energy, right? Let's say if we're affecting our immune system and, not being less fatigue or less sad, let's say, if people wake up and they have that would change their whole production in life and how they operate in life too. I know that we spoke as well when we were in New York about just even the longevity aspect of this. I know China's looking into longevity, right? And you would live longer in theory if you're happier, you live longer. So I could see people even just hearing, therapeutic in its own way. It's not medication, even though it is transhumanism. You're putting it into your body. They're going to think, well, I've got a cell phone. I do that anyway. What's the difference with it inside of me? And now I'm able to operate at a higher level than I ever been able to. And it could just be small little tweaks. Most people would say yes. I've talked to scientists. I was at Caltech last month, and I was speaking with a scientist, an astronomer, really, and he was asking me what else I was writing about. And I said, because I will write about astronomy at times. And I said to him, I do write about brain computer interfaces. And he was like, oh my God, I would for sure get one. And I started laughing because I'm like, you don't need one. Your brain operates on an insane level already. If anything, I need one with you. And I'm laughing when I'm at lunch speaking with him about some of these theories. I understand the theory, but he can do the math way quicker than I would be able to see that or be able to do that. And being able to understand theory, but understand the math and see it, you just have a deeper understanding of the world. That's what I truly do believe, because he understands the mechanics of it. And so I laughed because I said, well, you wouldn't need a BCI. And I said, I wouldn't get one. I wouldn't want one. And so it's funny, some of the smartest people in the world would still opt for a BCI. So,
That,
yeah.
I guess you could treat many aspects of brain function with the BCI. Wellness now, I probably right now.
But do we all want to be the same? That's the scary part, right? Yeah. Because you could say, or you could say to somebody, I hate the tag word narcissist, but it's so overused. But, you have narcissist personality disorder. I think you need a brain computer interface, and be like, well, it's not. This guy's just a dick. And maybe he's an asshole. Maybe he just has to learn about life and society without a brain computer interface, and he has to make choices himself to grow and evolve. What happens to natural evolution? And that doesn't even really exist anymore. Right. Or it does simultaneously beside a BCI. Like it changes us being human immensely.
Yes, but I think these emotional aspects they're interesting. Really, you want to take well educated decision. You feel you can't because you're so pissed off by the word someone else was using. Yeah. If you could say, if you had the button, make it, you know, remove emotional aspects to the information that I have, and so you can actually take a better decision. That is something that I would like to have. Take a decision, write it down, push the button, take a decision again. I'm sure it's a different one. And sometimes I think it's that would be good for the world and our world leaders.
I guess, yeah, we postpone the emotional reaction, be like the pause button, be like, I've heard something I don't like. So my brain decides to pause and the emotional aspect so I can think from it logically. And then it lets me think from it from an emotional perspective. But emotional, it's funny because emotions are still part of being human. Like we have to, right? We have to use emotions. When people say like women, for example, are more emotional and men are more logical, it's actually not true. Like when you look up the science, I've looked it up and I've seen. I'll put some studies here for people can see. It's actually not true. It's just stuff that we put as narrative into society. So I do agree that I think emotion comes over us for a reason, but it's how do we self regulate that emotion? And we have to learn how to self regulate ourselves and not a BCI to do it because we can. We just have to choose to change, or to evolve, I would say is a better word.
No, I agree with you. Absolutely.
Well, let's just hope that it doesn't come to the point where we're all getting BCIs because we're trying to control our emotions. That, who knows? My last question to you, with all the world dynamics and politics that are going on right now, gosh, within the Middle East, within China, within North America, gosh, even between Canada and the United States, how does BCI technology within those barriers that we see with world conflicts, how does BCI technology be able to still emerge from a positive perspective? Because if you're having BCI still embedded into defense, and we know that it was funded by DARPA originally in the 1950s and 60s. And we know that BCIs are used within defense. To what degree, I'm not sure yet, but we know that it's been used for veterans and it could technically be still used in warfare. We don't know, and we probably won't know for a while. How do we get around those relationships then? Because if countries are at odds, then that means that we might have challenges being able to share information about BCI technology advancements with each other because laws might prevent us from doing that.
Well, that's a horrible. Yeah. Well, I've absolutely no answer to that. So currently, the scientific communities, I think, these between Euro and North America are collaborating as good as they can. It's the level of companies, and it's of course a little bit restricted because we don't want to give people better by something valuable to it. Because we figured something out what we told them. I at this point in time I don't see very much from a European perspective, but there's more hesitation because of all those things happening. Um, and also from the European perspective, and I'm sure that's slightly different in the States. It's also not different to our relationship with China, which I would say it's not such a intense exchange as it is with one. But I think these global politics, the dynamic with that, at least they showed me and probably many other Germans something that we touched upon ethics. That ethics is also a dynamic thing. One example, when I grew up, uh, pacifism was absolutely undone. Yeah, so there's no point that we want to invest heavily in military or whatever. So in the 80s and 90s until then, that was clear, and everybody who actually asked for we need more missiles or whatever was considered someone who wants to drive us into the. And now with the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, it's really getting close to us and Germans. We see how the paradigm changed. When we think, then it seems like there's something to defend. And our view on defense changes. Also, my view on defense changes a lot. And also when we started the neurotechnology, so there's one thing that's crystal clear. We're not collaborating with any defense organization. And now we are still not working with any defense organization, but I wouldn't exclude it so clearly. Because we see war is coming closer. And if I have to send my sons in this war, I want them to have best technology available. If that's new technology, let's do it. So, so ethics and moral constructions change. And that's just one example that we just learned here. And I guess there are many, many more examples. That means if you today design the technology that's supposed to last for 60 years, in some or 18 years, and you build in some ethical guidelines, these ethical guidelines might change. So that's an extra challenge now, how to deal with that. I have no idea. But at the same time, I think there are so many good things that we can do. There's so much suffering that we believe from the technology is too difficult to get over. So I think at the same time as it is risky, it is and it's ethical challenge. We also see it would be unethical not to do it because for all that good things that we can actually do with the technology will be not. But you have to keep an eye on, you have to try to control which spirits of this also.
It's so true. And it's not a black and white topic. Sometimes I find myself caught in yes or no. And I'm like, "No, it's not that easy. It's not that simple. There's so much gray and there's so much nuance in it, because yes, people need it. We need to give it to them. It will change their lives. BCI will change their lives forever. And then for sure, there's on the scary, really scary end of it, there's a defense perspective. But for sure, veterans would need BCIs, right? There's BCIs connected to limbs as well that we're seeing, right? And multiple different companies, and Neuralink being the main one. And we're seeing how that would change their lives. So then we also see it from a warfare perspective too. If you are a soldier and you have a BCI and you're in the field, it could help you. It could help you strategize. It could help you now navigate. It could give you who knows what it is. It could give you more endurance, emotionally protect you potentially from the trauma that you're seeing. Like lots of things. If we've had that in different wars, it would have changed. It would have changed immensely how people process their emotions after war. So yes, I see that positive. And then you see the other side where, yeah, it's possible to be able to take that soldier and emotionally control their emotions and how they react when they're on the battlefield and make them lethal. So it's a fine line, and when do we find out, how do we know what is ethically right or wrong? And when do those guidelines and ethical guidelines come into play? So we will see. I hope
Yeah.
that I hope at one point I keep saying to myself, I'm hoping that BCI is pushed back, until it comes into the consumer set and integrated on a mass consumer base when I'm in my 80s or 90s, because then I'll be able to really just choose to opt out. And I won't have to do it because the way I go, even though I think it's positive, unless I need one for healthcare, and who knows that, knock on wood, that could be possible too. And maybe I'm just, learning about it now before I even get one. Who knows? Which would probably be wonderful. But right now, I think where I stand, I would say no. But
Yeah, but we have this statistics that every third person will eventually suffer from some neurological disorder. And not all in the brain, but obviously the brain is a central organ of our nerve system. And we all scared of dementia. If we had a tool that could actually help us with that push dementia 10 years back once it's diagnosed, that's already what we are.
I agree. My mom actually suffers from Alzheimer's. So I see it, she has for 8 years. So I see it on a daily basis. And I always think of her when I'm talking to people about BCIs or just BCI research, I think about how much it would have helped her 8 years ago if we were able to give her a BCI. Now it's too late, it's too far in her disease, but it would have changed all of our lives. It wouldn't have just changed my mom's for sure, but it would have changed mine, my father's, and my sister's as well. So, yeah, they're 100% needed. I just don't know if I want them from an aesthetic perspective or a cosmetic enhancement perspective. Not yet.
Well,
So,
that is something we have to respect. So, I guess whenever you design those things, cosmetics is sort of is one of the inputs that you don't want to be stigmatized by. Oh, that's a person to be great. So it has to be, and really in the early phase that we are still in, often it is not. But that's really one of those design for which we don't see that. Also, there's some sort of risk because we don't know if you have an upgrade in front of you.
well, that's true. That's true. Also, I will try to go to MIT. MIT Media Labs has something called Ultra Ego that came out last year, and I will take myself there to see if I can try the device. It's a device that you put on your head, and I'm not sure if you've seen this, but then you can communicate with somebody else who has the device, but you use silent speech, but it looks like telepathy. But it also translates it into a different language. So if the
Yeah.
person's speaking English, it will translate into Chinese. I think that is fantastic. Like I really want to try it as a product and see. So maybe I would find myself down that road rather than an implant is using something that would be something I could take on and off. I think that's more of where I would probably kind of lean towards. But those devices, when they get into the workplace, will change the workplace immensely if they're not already being used at MIT to some degree. So it is exciting. It's exciting. Like it really is. That's a cool product. Let's be honest. I think a
Yeah.
lot of
And
people will buy it.
yeah, and these devices are developed in much higher pace because we don't have to go through the regulations of implantables. You can basically try it on yourself, and then you tweak it, then you try it again, then you try it in your entire lab, and then it's almost a program.
It's wild though. Like you were
Yeah.
able with Ultra Ego, you were able to have a conversation across from you with somebody else in a telepathy moment. Like that's what it is. It looks like, regular old telepathy, but it's not. It's silent speech and it's silent communication. It to me that is wild that I could go to a restaurant and wouldn't have to say a single thing to the person beside me and they would know everything I was saying to them and even more.
um, yeah, well, I don't feel very much the need in this situation. But I do know the technology a little bit from the website and watching out, and I also like the guidance. But this is a real consumer outfit. So it is not to be, or it's a completely different thing compared to what any Czech is doing in San Francisco, right? Basically reading the mind for people that are severely impaired and can't speak. Because the alter ego device senses some residual activity from the cheek muscle, right? It tries to formulate. I think it really goes. I would like to see how robust that is.
Well, if I end up getting a media pass this year, I will send you the video I make of
Yeah,
me
yeah.
trying it. I will ask them if I can be the one media guinea pig that they put this on. And I imagine there's so many media members that have asked. They just haven't decided to do it yet. So hopefully one day, and if that happens, I will, Martin, for sure send you the video. Martin, thank you so much for joining me on Rebelliously Curious today. I love your insight. I love to speak to people that are not just from North America, but from all around the world about BCI. So please, when you're doing any more advancements or anything going on with CorTec, please keep me in the loop. And I would love to have you back on the show again.
Thank you so much, Chrissy.
Thank you.